Assalamu alaikum. Hello viewers. In previous video, I talked on classical realist theory of international relations. Now we'll talk on structural realism or Neorealism and new classical realist theory of international relations. Please subscribe my channel and press the bell icon to be informed with my new interesting video uploads. What is structural realism or new realism? When liberalism was proceeding and there was a challenge posed by the liberalism and more particularly Neo-Liberalism in the era of 1970s, then realists, they thought to have some kind of modification in their thoughts. So Kenneth N. Waltz, he wrote a book by the name of Theory of International Politics in 1979. And in that book, he described the theory of realism with new version. What is that new version? Actually, the classical realism or classical realists, they have focus on the state perceptions and state ambitions. I mean the egoistic structure, nature of the individual which pushes the state actions. But here in new realism or structural realism, it actually discusses structure of the international system or international politics. This theory talks about the distribution of capabilities in international system. The main concern here is the anarchic nature of international system, that there is no higher authority than the states which can control actions and reactions of the states. So this anarchic nature of international system pushes a state for a specific course of action. So this is the distribution of power, and changes in the capabilities of power in international system. It affects a state's policy positively or negatively. This distribution of power and capabilities in an international system is also responsible for the states' alliances and also balance of power. Here is example of the billiard, the snooker. When the main ball hits smaller balls in snooker or billiard, then the whole table disturbs and all the balls almost they hit one another and there is a disturbance. So same is the situation in international system. If a great power or superpower, if it has collision with another state, so it can pushes other states as well for some action. So then there may be formation of alliances, there may be some specific course of actions for the states. So this is the international system which is responsible for the states' action. Classical realism actually talks about the state actions motivated by the internal dynamics of the state. But here in Neorealism or structural realism, it is the capabilities distribution in international system among the states, or the structure of international system or international politics, which pushes the states for a specific course of action. Kenneth N. Waltz, Robert Jarvis, Robert Gilpin, Robert J. Art, John Mearsheimer, these are the scholars of Neorealism or structural realism. There was a competition, and still that competition and debate is going on between Neorealism and New Liberalism, because the Joseph S. Nye and Robert O. Cohen, they had already written a book on the interdependence and the politics of interdependence in the world, and they described and analyzed the cooperation, the ongoing cooperation among the states. So this Kenneth N. Waltz's book of structural realism was a kind of a reply to Joseph S. Nye and Robert O. Cohen account. Here is also about the balance of terror. Actually, the balance of terror is also the balance of power, but what it distinguishes from the traditional balance of power is in the Cold War period, when there was a competition, especially between the two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, especially in the nuclear arms. So a nuclear arms race was developing, and it was posing threat to each other's security. And this nuclear arms race, that was not only limited to the ground, to the atmosphere, but even it was there in the oceans, in the sea, and also in the outer space. So it also made the states very much worried and brought the two superpowers to the brink of a nuclear war. The term balance of terror was first coined by Mr. Pearson in June 1955 on the celebration of the 10th anniversary of the United Nations organization. So the both two superpowers, US and USSR, they were competing with one another, and they were posing threat to each other's security and survival. And the most glaring example, that is the Cuban Missile Crisis in October 1962, that have a small and weaker state of Cuba was posing threat to the security of the United States. And of course, that Cuba was helped and backed by Soviet Union by installing nuclear missiles on the soil of Cuba. So this balance of terror term was very much popular throughout the Cold War period between the United States and the USSR. This thing also creates the hegemonic behavior of the states. There is also a hegemonic stability theory that have a hegemon develops its own arms, its own military, its own power, and how it poses threat to other states in its own region or maybe in the world. So hegemon can be in a region, or it can be a world hegemon. Security dilemma, it also is created because of the states and tensions, and because of the relative gain. Relative gain concept is very much necessary in the political actions, and especially it has been discussed by the theory of realism and international relations, because relative gain is considered by another state as a threat. So there is the relative gain which stops cooperation among the states, and this can also give rise, especially the nuclear arms race, to the security dilemma, because one state's building security, it can be a threat and it can be a challenge, a danger to another state. So if a state develops its military, maybe in traditional arms or maybe in nuclear arms, maybe by itself or with the help of another state having alliance partnership, so it can pose to threat to another state, to another rival state. On the world level, especially in the Cold War period, we have examples of the United States and the USSR. And here in the subcontinent, if we see, so we have example of India and Pakistan. If India develops its nuclear arms, so Pakistan develops. India tested nuclear arsenal. Pakistan also responded by testing its own nuclear weapons. So if India launches a missile, Pakistan also launches a missile. If India takes start of the surface to surface or surface to air missile, Pakistan also responds in the same way. So this competition and this arms race between the two states, it creates security dilemma, and that is one of the glaring perspectives and consideration dynamics of the realist school of thought. There is also another dimension in this direction of the balance of power, that is balance of threat. threat. And this balance of threat was first used by Stephen M. Walt in his 1985 article, and later on he also elaborated more in his 1987 book. So what is balance of threat? Actually, the balance of threat concept, it determines the states' alliance behavior. When states they are in alliance with one another, they are alliance partners. So the threat perception or the danger of threat, it pushes the alliance. So the states' alliance behavior is determined by a threat. The European history, especially in the First World War, Second World War, and even before that and after the Second World War, if we see, so that is the manifestation of the balance of threat, that have states they join together and have the states alliances movements and actions. They were just reflecting the balance of threat by the states. In this connection, we have also Neo-Classical Realism. What is Neo-Classical Realism? Actually, it is the combination of both traditional and classical realism and the Neorealism or structural realism. This theory or the aspect of realism, it says that states' actions and reactions and states' survival and international system, these are just pushed by not only the internal dynamics of the states, the internal motives and motions of the state, but also the international system, change in international system, and also the capabilities in international system. It also talks about the polarity of international system. Same is the case with the Neorealism, that what kind of behavior a state will have while living in unipolarity when there is one single superpower, what kind of behavior a state will have when it lives in bipolarity, having two superpowers in the world, and what kind of behavior a state will have when it lives in tripolarity or multipolarity, having three superpowers or more than three superpowers. So the changes in distribution, changes in the capabilities distribution in international system, it affects the state's policy. So this Neo-Classical Realism was first coined by Godwin in 1998. So the combination of both the classical realism and the Neorealism or structural realism, it is called the Neo-Classical Realism. Here are two kinds of balance of power we have. And within the within the Neorealism, one that is the offensive realism. The main proponent of offensive realism is John Mearsheimer. What is offensive realism? Offensive realism is that a state want to maximize its power in anarchic international system. So the maximization of power by a state is called offensive realism, because a state considers that if I don't maximize my power, I don't build my military, so then it will be another state to maximize its power or to modernize and build its military in traditional weapons, can also in nuclear weapons. So a state, every state want to take initiative and take a lead in this regard. On the other hand, there is defensive realism. In defensive realism, the main proponent, that is the Kenneth and Waltz in defensive realism, is that you have also to develop your own weapons. So if a state takes initiative and develops its weapons, then another state, I mean, we have also responsibility and a kind of duty to increase our own capability and to build our own military weapons traditionally or in nuclear terms. So then this is the defensive realism, because a state's initiative in offensive terms, it also makes a state very cautious about its security, and it pushes a state towards defensive. So this kind of balance of power or balance of terror, it can further build security for the states, and in the terms of realism, or more particularly in terms of Neorealism or structural realism. Take care, viewers. Good luck.